let's talk about Jesus. How did he do it, and why did he do it?
Yeah. Well, this is one of the things that I think is so important for Christians to realize is that Jesus formed his community, his party of disciples, right? The Jesus party of disciples amidst a period of great political polarization. Um, that in Jesus' day, the central political question was, what do we do about Rome?
Yep.
Because it was a Roman imperial rule over Israel, and there were people who were cooperating with Rome and people who were opposing Rome
Hmm.
very vehemently. And two embodiments of that, two sides. This would be the red and blue version of
Oh,
first
you know
century
it.
Israel. Okay, would be a tax collector versus a zealot, right? A tax collector is somebody who's cooperating with Rome. They are collecting taxes for this oppressive regime against their own people, right? So you could imagine how if you were a Jewish nationalist, you're like, oh, you total sellout, you
For
tax
sure.
collector, right? And who are the ultra Jewish nationalists? They're the zealots, the zealot party. They are the political movement that wanted to defeat Rome using oftentimes military means,
Yep.
right? So what people don't realize is when Jesus picked his disciples, he deliberately picked somebody from both sides, right? In his disciples, we see identified is Simon the zealot, Matthew the tax collector, Matthew
Oh
11,
yeah, for sure.
right? So everybody else, interestingly, if you look at that passage, everybody else is identified by the classic identity markers of Jewish first century society, the son of so and so, the son of so and so. Simon and Matthew are identified differently. And I think it's for exactly the reasons we're talking about. They're identified as, hey, Jesus, and the scripture is telling us Jesus deliberately picked somebody from the two opposite sides of the most politically polarized issue of their day, a tax collector and zealot, and they were part of the original 12, the Jesus party that began all of this. What does that tell you about how Jesus is saying is the relationship between his rulership, his kingdom, and the kingdoms of the world, right? He's declaring by his very selection, my kingdom is transcendent, is over, is the Lord over all of these specific partisan divides, right? And so that, and they hung together. Jesus formed and taught them in a way that Simon and Matthew could hang together in the same party, even after his death. They hung together as the Jesus party, which became known as the Christians, the Christian church, right? So that's the model for us today is, can we be the disciples of Jesus? Can we be the Jesus party, right? Which clearly means even on the most polarizing issues, red and blue, right? Zealot and tax collector, we hang together. We hang together because we are actually have a higher allegiance than the allegiances that contemporary current day politics want to pull us apart into.
But you said something towards the end of your book, and you've been saying it throughout, but you actually haven't actually said it. And I think it comes down to this. I'll just read it to you because I just like quoting you instead. This book has been demonstrating that following Jesus means leaving behind the us versus them mindset. The world will inevitably subject you to political loyalty tests. So let's talk about this. That, when you talk about disappeared ones, the big sort, it really comes down to when I look at a person, and I have to confess, I've done this.
Yeah, me
I mean, I'm
too.
just telling you, I have.
Yeah, me
This
too.
us versus them.
Yeah.
How is this dangerous for in the kingdom?
Yeah, because the whole message of the gospel is there's an us. There is one us gathered around the
Oh,
cross. Galatians
yes.
3:28, right? Like neither Greek nor Jew, free or slave. And it's this idea that Jesus has reconciled all of the divisions in the world, all of the us versus them, right? This is why all the different formulations are Scythian versus Greek, Jew versus Gentile, like all of the first century us versus them. The Gospels proclaim Jesus has won over that. And the winning of an us versus them is not one side wins. It's that Jesus in the cross and his death and resurrection has created one us gathered around him in obedience and faithfulness to Jesus. So if the church is divided in a us versus them of the world, if we've got a red church and a blue church, a Democrat church and a Republican church, we are contradicting the Jesus gospel, the Jesus proclamation that in the cross, he's created one us around him, right? So this is why the us versus them, when we find ourselves slipping into the mentality and thinking, oh yeah, like just that of an us versus them mentality, we're betraying the gospel.